Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Representatives Baum, Camper, Freeman, Gant, Hawk, Hazelwood, Lynn, Ogles, Todd, Whitson, Williams, Wendell, Chairman Hicks.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. I'd like to call the Finance, Ways and Means Subcommittee to order for February 23rd, 2022. Members, any personal orders or announcements? Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a new friend that I've met in my office recently that's from West Tennessee, Mr. John Clore, an investment advisor with Edward Jones. I just make him welcome today.
Thank you for being here. Any other announcements or personal orders? All right, seeing none. We have a total of 23 bills on our calendar for today. Item number 1 is going to be House Bill 1981 by Speaker Pro Tem Marsh. And there he is. Motion. You have a motion and a second. Sir, you're recognized on House Bill 1981 for a brief description.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this bill is a great bill, and it's got a $200 fiscal note on it, and I'm ready to pay that out of my pocket if I can. This bill, 1981, codifies the use of ambulance operators and clarifies that for-hire endorsement is not needed to operate an ambulance, as has been allowed by the emergency rule and executive orders during the COVID-19 pandemic. This creates 2 new categories of personnel. The EMS category is personnel is unlicensed. EMSA or EMS apprentice is a position intended to offer a gateway position for new recruits to work for the ambulance service while working toward a license. An EMS-A is allowed to help lift patients on a gurney and give the ambulance and put them in the ambulance. EMR is a category for personnel is licensed as a level below EMT. An EMR can perform basic life functions such as CPR, oxygen administration, limited medication, splinting, and patient assessment. Upon employment, an EMSA or EMR is licensed as an EMR. The employee has 12 months to enter to a higher level of training. So this is going to help us out in our EMS people to allow them to have drivers that aren't certified as long as they're working to be certified.
All right. Thank you, Speaker, for this description. Members, any discussion on House Bill 1981? Leader Camper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for bringing this bill. We talk a lot about how important it is to create a pipeline, and that, for a lot of the careers that we don't have a real true pipeline to get people interested and trained. So I think this creates a great opportunity to get our younger people, emerging adults interested in this career field and give them a pathway to really productive careers. So I appreciate it. And Mr. Chairman, I hope that we can do something with this $200 fiscal note. Pass that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Leader Camper. Further discussion? Well, as the sponsor has alluded to, there is a fiscal note attached to House Bill 1981, and to show that we are fair and balanced here in the Budget Subcommittee, we will have to work on that fiscal note just a little bit, but I think we can hopefully get there by the end. So, without objection, House Bill 1981 goes behind the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That's all right. All right, that brings us to item number 2 on our calendar, House Bill 1678 by Leader Lamberth. We're going to roll this to the hill of the calendar without objection. Roll to the hill. That brings us to item number 3. That is House Bill 1679, also by Leader Lamberth. We'll also roll that to the hill of the calendar without objection. Roll to the hill. That brings us to item number 4 on our calendar. That's House Bill 1832, also by Leader Lamberth. And without objection, we're going to roll that to the hill. That brings us to item number 5. Item number 5 is House Bill 1681 by Chairman Subcommittee. All right. Without objection, we're going to roll this to the Hill. That brings us to Chairman Curcio, item number 6. He has also asked that we roll this to the Hill. So we will roll this without objection to the Hill. That brings us to item number 7. Item number 7 is House Bill 2196 by Chairman Keesley. This has been requested to be rolled 1 week, so without objection, we'll roll this 1 week. That brings us to item number 8 by Chairman Moon. He's always on time. House Bill 2426. Sir, you have a motion to second. You're recognized on House Bill 2426 for a brief description.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. This bill is brought to me by the treasurer. All the stakeholders have worked on it, the banks and so forth. The bill amends current law relative to collateral pool board. The bill also amends current law defining eligible collateral posted by banks that are collateral pool participants in state depositories. Basically says what securities are in and what securities are out. As to the pool board itself, it's comprised of 9 members. 4 of those members are from the private sector, 5 from the government sector. The bill amends current law to provide that the board may change pool participant admission criteria and pledge levels by the board vote without going through the rulemaking process. The board may only exercise this authority under urgent circumstances and on a temporary basis. The board also must give adequate public notice as to the specific changes contemplated, the reasons for the changes, the effective date and the expiration date of the changes, and opportunity for members of the public and other interested parties to make comment. It requires a 2/3 vote of the board. Mr. Chairman, I'll entertain any questions.
All right, Chairman Moon, thank you for this description. Members, any discussion on House Bill 2426? Seeing none, we're now voting on House Bill 2426, moving on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 2426 moves to full finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That brings us to item number 9. But before we get to item number 9, hold on 1 second. Let's recognize Chairman Whitson.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know I'm out of order, but I want to recognize some folks here to help us repeal a tax, a privilege tax today, and that's Matt Haskell, Daniel Burke, Scott Adams, and Ryan McCain from Williamson County. Thank you guys for being here and supporting us.
Thank you, Chairman. That brings us to item number 9, House Bill 1893 by Chairman Reagan. Sir, you are recognized. We have a motion second. We have a motion to second. You're recognized on House Bill 1893 for a brief description.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. To echo the words of one of my predecessors, this is a really great bill. Actually, what it's doing is restoring some equity. Currently, in law, we provide tax exemption to our National Guard, Air National Guard members for purchase of a vehicle once every 5 years. But we inadvertently left out the active guard and reserve component, and this bill just basically allows them to participate in the program the same as everyone else. With that explanation, I'm ready to entertain questions.
All right. Thank you, Chairman. Members, you've heard the description of House Bill 1893. Any discussion? And before we do get started on that, let me say, Chairman Reagan, a gentleman back home, he lives in Elizabeth, and Larry Brown, has worked about as hard on this bill, I think, back in my neck of the woods, and I want to certainly give him his kudos. He has worked hard for these men for what we're trying to do here, and I certainly support what you're doing there. Proud to have signed on to the bill. Chairman Todd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate you, Chairman Reagan, bringing this. It's very important, and I certainly hope that we can find the right way in the budget to get this covered. Thank you, sir.
Further discussion? Seeing none, House Bill 1893, of course, as we've already said, does have a cost associated with it. I look forward to working with you, and I'm sure the other members do, to try to get this across the finish line. But until then, we will have to place it without objection behind the budget. That brings us to item number 10. Item number 10 on our calendar is House Bill 2042, also by Chairman Reagan. You have a motion to second. Sir, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Another great bill. Essentially what this bill does is remove taxation from precious metal bullion. We currently have in our tax code, we're, I think, one of 7 states, if I remember correctly, that does this. This simply removes that sales tax from those precious metal bullion cubes so that our citizens can purchase these things as a hedge against inflation. And they can also be put into IRAs and other things. The benefits from this, quite frankly, are we would be able to host in our state, which as we do right now with gun shows, shows for the sale of coins and these precious metal bullion issues. I would encourage you to consider that, and I will point out, I know where this bill is going, but before it goes there, I will point out that the popular press has pointed out we have a surplus. Now, all of you know it's not really a surplus, it's an underestimate of revenue coming in. But the fact of the matter is, I can't really see an excuse for continuing to tax our citizens when we are already getting more than we've estimated. And I think in part we're getting more than we estimated because we have been reducing taxes and reducing regulations. This is just continuing that tradition. With that explanation, I stand ready to answer questions.
All right, thank you for this description. Members, any discussion on House Bill 2042? Seeing none, as the sponsor has already alluded to, it does have a cost associated with it. So without objection, House Bill 2042 behind the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee.
All right, that brings us to item number 11. Item number 11 is House Bill 170 by Chairman Zachary. There's Chairman Zachary. We have a motion and a second. Sir, you're recognized on House Bill 170 for a brief description.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Mr. Chairman, I know you like brief explanations, so I will keep this brief. Members, this is a follow-up to the Competitive Wireless Broadband Investment, Deployment, and Safety Act we passed in 2018. After we passed that, the FCC months later passed an order that differs now from state law. This simply aligns us with that FCC order. I brought a bill last year. It created the wailing and gnashing of teeth in committee. So we agreed to punt and get all parties together, TML, AT&T, Verizon, all parties got together, came to an agreement. This puts us in line with the FCC order, does 5 specific things. Section 1 of the bill relates to the aesthetic plan. Section 2 is the enclosure size. Section 3 is the right-of-way. Section 4 is fees and rates. And Section 5 is the height of the small cell towers in communities. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Chairman. Members, you've heard the description. Any discussion on House Bill 170? Seeing none, we're now voting on House Bill 170. Moving on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 170 moves to full finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
All right, that brings us to item number, there he is, item number 12, House Bill 1979 by Representative Bricken, and he's in the back. Give him a minute to get situated here.
Get one chair out.
Representative Bricken, you are recognized. You do have a motion and a second on House Bill 1979. You're recognized for a brief description.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee member. This bill is brought by the Secretary of State. It continues for 1 year the reduction in the annual charitable solicitation registration to $10. And with that, I will stop talking.
All right, you've heard the description. Any discussion on House Bill 1979? Seeing none, it does have a cost associated with it, so it's got a little more work to do, but certainly look forward to working with you. So without objection, House Bill 1979 goes behind the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, committee.
All right, that brings us to item number 13. Item number 13 on our calendar is House Bill 2340 by Representative Carringer. She has been waiting patiently. You have a motion and a second. Representative Carringer, you are recognized on House Bill 2340 for a brief description.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. House Bill 2340 was brought to me by Tennessee Treasury Department, and what this bill does is amend the law governing the Interagency Cash Flow Committee, which is composed of state officials and staff members from Treasury, Comptroller's Office, Finance, Administration, and Revenue. The committee is charged with establishing and compiling and maintaining cash flow projections for the state. Under the existing law, the committee is charged with maintaining an 18-month forward rolling cash flow projection, estimating cash to be received and expended by the state. In summary, This bill would just allow the cash flow report on a more on an 18-month forward, where it specifies that the 6 local government universities are exempt from the requirement to periodically provide information relating to sources and uses of pooled investment fund cash. Requires state agencies to, upon request, provide cash flow projection information to the Department of Finance and Administration in addition to the Tennessee Interagency Cash Flow Committee.
All right, thank you, Representative Carringer, for this description. Members, any discussion on House Bill 2340? Seeing none, we're now voting on House Bill 2340. Moving on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 2340 moves to full finance.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to item number 14. That is House Bill 1646. There's Representative Hall. You have a motion and a second. Sir, you're recognized on House Bill 1646 for a brief description.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and colleagues. Historically, in the past, an assault on law enforcement canines has been nothing more than a destruction of property crime. House Bill 1646 changes all of that. It moves it up to a Class B felony. It takes the shackles off the DA and the judges to give the bill the proper teeth that it needs for the punishment. This bill is endorsed by the Tennessee Sheriff's Association in all 95 counties, and all the ingredients is in this bill. If you're an animal lover, if you're pro-law enforcement, or if you just want to be a steward of the taxpayers' money, this bill has it all. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I renew my motion.
All right, thank you, Representative Hall, for this description. Members, any discussion on House Bill 1646? Seeing none, it does have a cost associated with it, but we certainly look forward to working with you to try to get this one funded. So thank you for bringing it forward. But without objection, House Bill 1646 goes behind the budget. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. All right, that brings us to item number 15. Before we do that, let's back up. I see Leader Lamberth walking into the room. So members, let's go to item number 2 on your calendars. Item number 2 is House Bill 1678 by Leader Lamberth. Sir, you have a motion and a second. You're recognized for a brief description.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this would allow for an aggravated assault charge that involves a deadly weapon that is fashioned to look like a deadly weapon but is not actually one, to still be charged as aggravated assault. Unfortunately, this happens quite a lot of our state, and thus it has a pretty large fiscal note. So, Mr. Chairman, I have a feeling I know where this is going to go today. But I hope at some point down the road this would be considered to actually be funded in the budget.
All right. Thank you, Leader, for that description. Members, any discussion on House Bill 1678? Seeing none, the Leader has already stole my thunder to say that it does have a cost associated with it. So, without objection, it will go behind the budget. All right, that brings us to item number 3, also by Leader Lamberth, House Bill 1679. You have a motion and a second. You're recognized on House Bill 1679 for a brief description.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize. I've got a frog in my throat, so I may sound a little bit hoarse. It just happened a few minutes ago. I think I sprained my vocal cords, so apologize. But, yeah, so thank you. But I figured y'all enjoy that. Sorry. But this bill deals with expungements, and this actually came from one of our colleagues. Representative Halford had reached out to me several months ago about a constituent of his that had a minor crime, a theft, I believe it was, on their history, and then years later had gotten a DUI. And because of the DUI offense, they could not go back and expunge the actual theft-related offense. Now, they were eligible to have that expunged. It was a first-time offense, should have been able to get that expunged. And in this young lady's circumstance, the DUI was not a barrier to being employed, but the theft was. And again, fully expungible, except for the fact later in life she got a non-expungible offense. This just allows that person to go back and expunge that first offense one time. We're not expanding anything there. And Mr. Chairman, I'm glad to say I believe this has a positive fiscal note, an increase in local revenue, because folks do pay to have their records expunged at the local level. We don't charge them anything at the state level for this type of expungement, but at the local level they do.
All right, thank you for this description. Members, you've heard from the sponsor. Any discussion on House Bill 1679? Seeing none, we're now voting on House Bill 1679, moving on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 1679 moves to full finance. brings us to item number 4 on our calendar, House Bill 1832, also by Leader Lamberth. You have a motion to second. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this sets up a process that we've all delved into over the last several years dealing with judicial redistricting. We all just went through a redistricting process. It was difficult for all of us to go through that, and it is high time that our local judicial districts go through that same process. This doesn't change anything. It just sets up a committee appointed by the speakers to really delve into this, and before their next elections, actually come back with a report so that we can actually do judicial redistricting.
All right, thank you for this description. Members, any discussion on House Bill 1832? Seeing none, it does have a cost associated with it, so we will have to place it behind the budget, and we will pick it up at a later time. So without objection, House Bill 1832 will go behind the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and that's the daunting figure of $3,900, so I'm hopeful. But I would ask that it at least be considered, and thank you all very much. I appreciate you.
All right, that brings us... That brings us to item number 6. Item number 6 on our calendar is House Bill 1449 by Chairman Curcio. You have a motion to second. Sir, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee, and we apologize. We had some business across the hallway. It took a little bit longer than we thought, but do I need to put the amendment's traveling with? I don't need to put it on.
That's correct.
Okay.
It is traveling.
Members, a couple of years ago, we passed legislation that fixed an inequity in our criminal code, which dealt with drug-free zones. Very well-intentioned legislation to try to keep drug dealers and activity around from our schools and daycares. Unfortunately, because of the mandatory minimums that were in there, the judge's hands were tied, and so you had folks who, not excusing the behavior, but had a very small, user amount of drugs, pulled over maybe for a tail light or for some other minor traffic infraction, happened to be near school, and unfortunately, those folks are serving sentences that are longer, in some cases, than murderers and rapists in our prison system. That was wrong, and that was an inequity that you already solved. So I'm not asking you to solve that problem today. We passed a law to fix that. What this bill does is it deals with a encapsulated amount of folks, about 495 people, who were incarcerated under the old law, which we repealed, and it would allow for them to petition the court for a hearing. So this is not an automatic get-out-of-jail-free card, anything like that. It's where the DA and the judge can get together, hold an evidentiary hearing, and see whether or not this person should be resentenced given the new law. A couple of very important safeguards in here. Number one, I'll say, I don't think all of those folks who are in this population need to be released by any way, shape, or form. That's why that's not what I'm advocating for here, but rather the judge may consider the defendant's criminal record, including any subsequent criminal convictions, the defendant's behavior while incarcerated, the circumstances surrounding the offense, including but not limited to whether the conviction was entered into pursuant to a plea deal, and any other factors that they deem relevant. We want to make sure we get this right. I think there's a small minority of folks there who truly were in the wrong place at the wrong time. I've reviewed some of those cases, and this is to set up an avenue for them to be able to be reviewed. So with that, take any questions.
All right, thank you very much for this description. Members, in discussion on House Bill 1449. Seeing none, we're now voting on House Bill 1449, moving on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 1449 moves on to full finance.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee.
All right, members, that takes us back to item number 15. Item number 15 on our calendar is House Bill 1320 by Representative Hardaway. Sir, you have a motion and a second. You are recognized for a brief description.
Thank you, sir, and thank you to the committee for agreeing to make this time available for testimony by the witnesses who will come before you. I'll just make one observation before they come, and that is that one of the things that I know about fiscal notes is they don't take everything into account. In studying the fiscal note on House Bill 1320, which creates an offense of using force or coercion to cause a person to join a criminal gang against the person's will. And the penalties are directly proportional to the age of the child. The younger the child, the more severe the penalties. We have got to stop putting our children in the crosshairs of criminal gang recruitment, period. The way to do it is to deter that recruitment behavior by increasing the penalties. This fiscal note doesn't take into consideration the monies saved by not having to incarcerate children, not having to move dozens of children, as it is today, statewide. Dozens of children are moved from juvenile court to adult criminal court for prosecution. Those savings are not reflected in your fiscal note. Mr. Chairman, I hope to have those savings defined, detailed by the time we get to the behind the budget considerations. But what I'd like for you to do today in order to help you to understand how important this bill is to have the witnesses who are the family members of Artemus Rayford. Artemus was a promising young scholar who was gunned down in his own home on Christmas morning, playing with his Christmas presents. Had nothing to do with whatever the senseless violence was in the streets, but he paid the ultimate price just for being in the safety and protection of his own home on Christmas morning, members. So, Mr. Chairman, I would ask that you allow testimony by two of the family members, the grandmother and the aunt of Artemus Rayford.
Representative Hardaway, and first of all, let me say thank you for bringing this bill, and thank you for the folks that are here today to testify. However, there is an issue with them being able to testify because you sent an email asking me to put someone on the list, but you never gave me names. And also you referenced the wrong, I guess there was an oversight, the wrong bill. I reached out to your office. We never heard anything back, so I wasn't able to get them on the list. So unfortunately, our rules will not allow that right now. However, you would have the opportunity, once this bill moves forward, and it pains me to tell you this, and we tried to reach out, and I tried to catch you before, but really our rules will not allow it. So if we could, hold on one second, I'll come to you. So, and it's not my rules, it's just what the rules we've been operating under, and I hate to tell you that, and I really do. So that's kind of where we're at. We'll go to Leader Camper, but if you want to respond first, and I know that's not what you wanted to hear, but that's where we are.
I'll respond after the leader. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I was hoping that because the family have traveled so far, and we've done it in the past where we've suspended rules for exceptional reasons. So I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules to hear from this family that has traveled so far.
All right. So, members, a motion has been made to suspend the rules, and it has received a second. So we will put that at a vote and see what the members would like to do. So before we do you've heard the motion, that's non-debatable, so we will go ahead and vote at this time. All those in favor of suspending the rules, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes do have it. So we will suspend the rules. And with that, you're recognized, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. I recognize we do have rules. I guess the question would be, as far as timing is concerned, we are suspending the rules, but the motion was not made about timing, but it's my understanding that it's 3 minutes.
That is correct.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your question. I'm in agreement. Whatever the rules are for testimony, if it's 3 minutes, 2, whatever it is, that we abide by those rules. But I really do appreciate everybody voting in the affirmative.
Okay, thank you. All right, without objection, we're going to go out of session, and we'll call the witnesses up. Without objection, if the witnesses would come forward, and all we will ask you to do is please identify yourself.
My name is Joyce Newsom. I'm a Tima's grandmother, which we call him Sean. On the day of Christmas morning, I guess that's the rough thing you can hear, to get a call from someone saying that your grandson had got shot. And this had brought a very tremendous thing for our family. Timus was the second knee baby of 9 siblings. And the baby girl was close to sibling. I said I got 3 minutes, okay, so I'm trying to be brief. They not able to stay in the house anymore. The little girl got nightmares. It took her 3 days to wipe the blood off of her fingers. The mom she have to have a drink every night before she go to bed. And one thing that she gonna have to deal with for the rest of her life is when Artemis got shot. He got up from the game that he was playing and ran in there to his mom. But it's nothing his mom could do. There's nothing she could do. So that's just something she just gonna have to live for the rest of her life. So I know this bill it might not help Artemis right now, but maybe the next family might not have to go through this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We would ask the next person to please come forward. And again, just identify yourself for the record, please.
Hi, I'm Angie Brooks. I'm Artemis Rayford's aunt. I really don't have much to say. I'm kind of emotional right now. My mom did most of the talking, and I thank her for that. But I just hope this bill passes and it helps another family, because our family is really going through with Sean. We call him Sean. And this is something that another family shouldn't be able to go through. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else to testify at this time?
Mr. Chairman, only 2 members have the wish to testify at this time, even though more family members made the drive.
Before we'll go back in session just for a second, but let me say thank you all so much for you being able to stand up there. I quite frankly don't know how you were able to do that, but thank you for being here very much. So without objection, we'll go back into session. Sir, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to express how deeply appreciative I am for the family coming, and for the committee suspending the rules to hear them. They came in this morning, driving through the weather from Memphis, and they have to go back later on today, and we pray for traveling grace for them. What some of their testimony helped to emphasize is what the social costs are, and there's some hard costs. The psychological damage that's been done to the family, to the children in particular. We're going to expect these children to go to school and to perform as other children when they've been submitted to the most severe trauma possible, the violence which took the life of a sibling. The mother was originally scheduled to travel and testify before a committee today. She's unable to do so. Her ability to function as a normal mom with children, she still has children she has to care for, has been severely impaired by the violence it took her 12-year-old's life. So I'll ask, Mr. Chairman, that the committee members would give the utmost in consideration to how this bill, by restricting and deterring the ability for gangs to recruit young folks, will also cause less violence in the streets, because there will be fewer criminal gang members. If those gang members aren't able to recruit young folks. They can't do all this crazy street violence, shooting at each other, running up and down the street, driving up and down the street. So I'll ask that you consider the cost to the community, the cost to society that's not reflected in the fiscal note, but it is reflected in the reality, the tragic reality that the family of Artemis Rayford and those who are in that unfortunate group of families who have lost children that they belong to. So I thank you for your time, and I will see you behind the budget.
All right, Representative Hardaway, thank you very much for bringing this forward. And again, thank you to the family. Members, any discussion on House Bill 1320? Oh, Representative Ogles, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman, and I just want to thank the sponsor for bringing this piece of legislation and for the family making that trip. I know that was a hard trip to make. We appreciate you all being here greatly. Just something I thought about, maybe a quick recommendation, something. There's a statute that I believe you're very familiar with, was that of community terrorism. I had a thought of maybe down the road if a member might think about amending that to include recruitment, which would make it a subcategory, which I believe sometimes fiscal notes differently. But if you were to amend that and another piece of legislation were to pass that you're working on, it would make their assets seizable as well. So not only could we punish the crime of recruitment, we could also take the assets of those criminals who are involved in this enterprise as well as they're recruiting our young people. So just maybe a suggestion.
Thank you, Representative Ogles. You recognize Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate Representative Ogle and his suggestion. I'm quite familiar with that concept of community terrorism, and I've been blessed to be able to work with Representative Ogle on a bill that's progressing through the system. And I think that it's probably a good idea to make this, as well as a couple of other bills, companion bills, so that the committee would be able to more fairly judge the fiscal impact as cited. And thank you for the suggestion, Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Representative Hardaway. Further discussion on House Bill 1320? Seeing none, as the sponsor has alluded to, it does have a cost associated with it, so we will have to place it behind the budget and consider it at a later date. However, the bill has been calendared 3 times, and we will need to place it on a special calendar to be published with our final calendar pursuant to House rules. So without objection, House Bill 1320 will go on the special calendar to be published with the final calendar. Without objection, so moved. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, item number 16. Item number 16 on our calendar is House Bill 340 by Representative Lamar. That's been requested to be rolled to the Hill without objection. So moved. That brings us to item number 17. Item number 17 on our calendar is House Bill 2654. You've got a motion to second. Representative Mitchell, you're recognized for a brief description.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. This is just to give a tax reduction to retail businesses and hospitality businesses that install electric chargers. This state is going to be the preeminent leader in the nation in building electric vehicles in the coming years, with the Volkswagen models being built in Chattanooga, in Spring Hill with the battery plant and the electric Cadillac, and then in West Tennessee with the Ford Blue Oval City. It'll be at least a baseline of 12,000 good-paying jobs, plus all the ancillary jobs that go along with that. So I'm just proposing a 5% deduction on business taxes for that calendar year that they install the charging station at their business. For someone in the hospitality business, and 4% deduction for someone in the retail industry. It'll cost them between $5,000 to $7,000 to install one of these charging stations, but it just makes good sense for us producing so many cars in Tennessee to encourage our citizens to buy these cars, so we produce more jobs with producing more of these cars. So it helps the bottom line of revenue in the long run for the state of Tennessee to make sure this industry is highly successful. And with that, I'll take any questions.
All right, thank you, Representative Mitchell. Members, you've heard the description. Any discussion on House Bill 2654? Leader Camper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative, for bringing this bill, because I think you're absolutely right in us thinking long-term, the impact that electric vehicles going to have on the state. If you think about what's going to happen with the Ford Corporation, the more we are prepared to get ready for this, I think the better for us. So I support your bill. I appreciate you bringing it.
You're recognized.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, and, committee, this is 88 pages of tax breaks given by other states for electric vehicles, the electric car industry. Of this 88 pages, about a third of one page is Tennessee's part of this stack of papers. So, we're behind on incentivizing and encouraging this industry, but we're at the forefront of getting the jobs. So I think we need to put our money where our mouth is.
All right, thank you, Representative Mitchell. Further discussion on House Bill 2654. Representative Ogles, you recognize.
Thank you, Chairman, and to the sponsor. And I've just been getting a lot of emails the last couple of weeks about potholes of all things. And so one of the questions is these electric vehicles, they're not buying gas, so they're not paying taxes. How are they contributing to our road systems and our maintenance, which the other vehicles and the truckers that have to buy lots of diesel? I don't know much about the industry, so I'm not trying to set you up. I'm truly trying to figure out.
And I totally agree. We're going to have to, down the line, as the industry becomes the dominant in the state, we're going to have to look at how do we fund our roads and how do we do that. You've got a very good point, but right now the only answer I can give to you is it's certainly helping the quality of the air in Tennessee, and we definitely appreciate that.
Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just trying to gather some insight from the people that know way more about that than I do. So, but thank you to the sponsor.
All right, thank you, Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Chairman. And to answer the question that was just posed, there is currently a little bit over $100 fee on every electric vehicle during registration that goes to that fund. And by the high end of the estimations, it's $300 annually for a large truck, a large consumer. There are some that are significantly less currently within that exact taxing of the fuel. So there absolutely has to be some way to solve this other than taxing the fuel. So,
thank you, Representative Freeman. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, you do not have the fortunate pleasure as Chairman Hicks and Chairman Hazelwood have served on Appropriations Subcommittee. But if you want to go back a couple of weeks and watch the testimony there, we ad nauseum talked about electric vehicles, charging stations, funding sources, and all those kinds of things. So I'd save you from having to come to committee, but you can just watch it online at your leisure.
Thank you, Representative Williams. Further discussion? Seeing none, there is a fiscal note associated with House Bill 2654. So without objection, we will have to place it behind the budget. So without objection, House Bill 2654 behind the budget.
Thank you, Chairman. Committee.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to item number 18, where Representative Sexton has been waiting patiently. House Bill 2520. You have a motion to second. You're recognized on House Bill 2520 for a brief description.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I just put a cough drop in my mouth, so it's stuck about halfway, so bear with me. What this bill does, and I'm sure that you all know, but this bill is to eliminate the privilege tax from these list of professionals that are retiring or have retired and would like to use their time on a voluntary basis, not to make any money. There's no profit. If they were doing it for a for-profit, they would have to get their license renewed. It's strictly for volunteer services. We have in Morristown, and this came about from a constituent of mine that is a physician, and we have what's called First Love on Main in Morristown, and they do dental work, they do medical work, they do a lot of different types of, they do legal work. And he said that he would love to volunteer a couple of days a week there, but he just doesn't want to pay the $400 a year for his privilege tax. So he asked me if I would carry this bill. I told him that I would be glad to. I know we've been trying to work on that. The physical note, I don't know how that they came up with that. I haven't talked with them, but I'm sure that it's probably close. It comes up in my estimation to be about almost 1,500 people. I don't know how that they would come up with that, except some of these I'm sure they're still doing it for profit. This would be only for those that are doing volunteer work. They could not make a profit by having this. So that's the bill in a nutshell. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Representative Sexton. Members, you've heard the description and discussion on House Bill 2520. Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you. In order to achieve marital harmony, I must speak on behalf of this bill, although we all know where it's going, but this is a pet peeve of my husband's as well, because he's a retired physician, would like to do some volunteer work, and he does pay the tax, but I hear about it all year. So it would be very helpful to me if we could find the money to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Lady. You're recognized, Representative Sexton.
I just think God's looking down on me today. To have the chairman of finance that's in the same position.
Representative Ogles, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman, and to the committee, and this may be a question to others that have worked on this, but the retired status, does that mean the license is still active? Because some of these trades and some of these professions require ongoing education, ongoing to keep that status. So, but they're still having to keep their Series 7, 63. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Representative Ogles. Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment, not a question. I am in favor of any bill we can bring to get rid of every single one of these professional privileges taxes once and for all. They're wrong. They were wrong to start with, and we, as a conservative legislature, must deal with this year. We've got the money. We certainly should have the will and the fortitude to do it, and we need to make this happen. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Todd. Further discussion on House Bill 2520. Seeing none, as the sponsor alluded to, it does have a cost associated with it. So without objection, we will have to place House Bill 2520 behind the budget. Without objection, so moved.
Thank you, Chairman and committee.
Thank you, Representative Sexton. All right, that brings us to, I don't see Representative Sapicki anywhere or Representative Lamar before we. All right, moving right along. Item number 19 on our calendar is House Bill 519 by Leader Gant. You have a motion second. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Todd just made my opening remarks for me, so thank you, Representative Todd. What this is doing, we're pulling this, Chairman, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're pulling this out from behind the budget to put this amendment on, and then I assume it's going to go back behind the budget. Is that correct?
Yes, so that's correct. And I just want to make sure the drafting code I have for the amendment that we do need to put on is 011375. Is that what you have?
That is correct.
All right. Do we have a motion second on the amendment? You have a motion to second. You are recognized for description on the amendment.
All right. What this amendment does is it actually, there's still several professions that are left in this unfair tax, and they are attorneys, physicians, investment advisors, and lobbyists. And what this particular amendment does is it takes that $400 per year that these professions pay, and it stair steps it down $100 per year for the next 4 years. And then after that fourth year, the tax is abolished at that point. And Krista has presented a updated fiscal note on this, and the yearly fiscal cost to this amendment is $19,993,000 per year. So the total 4-year fiscal cost is $79,973,000. So that's the hurdle that we've got to overcome, as Representative Todd alluded to in this session, and I would encourage, as all of you have, you've had the discussions amongst yourselves, and we've been having a very robust conversation about this, and so I feel confident that we'll come to some kind of conclusion to finally map this out to where it's hopefully abolished over a period of time. And this just gives one example of getting rid of this tax that is being talked about. So we may come back with more amendments, but this is the amendment that we have at this point that we're going to submit. So thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
All right, thank you, Leader Gant. Members, you've heard the description of the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? Question's been called. Any objection to calling the question? Seeing none, we are now voting on Amendment 011375 to House Bill 519. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. We are back on the bill as amended. Any discussion on the bill as amended? And Leader Gant, you did give a full description there, so do you want to be recognized on the bill as amended?
No, Mr. Chairman, we're good.
All right, thank you. Members, any discussion on the bill as amended? Seeing none, as the sponsor alluded to, there is a fiscal note associated with House Bill 519, so I'm sure we will be discussing this quite a bit with this particular session. So without objection, House Bill 519 will be placed behind the budget. We also will have to, since it has been calendared 3 times, we'll also place it on a special calendar to be published with our final calendar pursuant to our House rules. So without objection, House Bill 519 will go on special calendar to be published with the final calendar. Without objection, so moved. All right. Thank you, Leader Gant. All right, that brings us to item number 20. Item number 20 on our calendar is House Bill 1937 by Chairman Hazelwood. You have a motion to second. And Chair Lady, it looks like you have an amendment. Would you like to go and put the amendment on before?
Yes, the amendment does make the bill. It's Amendment 013766.
Okay, that's what I have. You have a motion to second. You're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This simply clarifies some things for vendors who sell to customers who, sometimes these customers are wholesalers, sometimes they're retailers. The tax rate is different. So this would allow the vendor, the Department of Revenue would give a certificate to the vendor's customer that would determine whether they're a wholesaler or retailer at a particular location or in a particular situation. That would be good for that tax year. That way the vendor knows what sort of tax rate they should apply to a particular customer. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would entertain any questions.
All right, thank you for the description on the amendment. Members, any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, we're now voting on Amendment 013766 to House Bill 1937. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. We're back on the bill as amended. And Chair Lady, you're recognized on the bill as amended if you have any final thoughts.
As I said, the amendment does make the bill.
All right. Members, any discussion on House Bill 1937? Seeing none, we're now voting on House Bill 1937, moving on to full finance. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 1937 moves to full finance. Thank you, Chair Lady. And that brings us to item number 21. Item number 21 is House Bill 959 by Chairman Whitson. We have a motion second. You have a motion and a second. You're recognized for a brief description on House Bill 959.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 959 will allow Tennessee to join in the process of forming an interstate compact, allowing licensed professional counselors to practice in all states that join the compact. On my marked calendar, it shows BB. I thought that stood for Best Bill, but I don't think so today. I redo my motion.
That's pretty good there. That's All right, members, you've heard the description from Chairman Whitson. Any discussion on House Bill 959? Seeing none, even though this bill may be the best we've seen today, we're still going to have to see the costs associated with it, which is going to force us to have to put it behind the budget. So without objection, House Bill 959 goes behind the budget. All right, that brings us to item number 22, again by Chairman Whitson, House Bill 1667. You have a motion and second. You are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And House Bill 1667 creates a state library coordinator position within the department, and it established the duties of the Tennessee State Library Coordinator. With that, Mr. Chairman, I renew my motion.
All right, members, you've heard the description for House Bill 1667. Any discussion? Seeing none, there is a cost associated with House Bill 1667. So without objection, we will have to place it behind the budget. Without objection, so moved.
Okay, members, this brings us to item number 23 on the calendar. It's House Bill 2144 by Chairman Hicks. We've got a motion and a second. Chairman Hicks, you're recognized for a description on the bill.
All right. Thank you, Chairman. The purpose of this legislation is to decouple from a change in the federal tax code that took effect January of this year related to research and development expenses. Since 1954, the federal tax code had allowed companies to immediately deduct R&D expenses in the year that they were actually incurred. Federal legislation in 2017 eliminated the option for businesses to deduct R&D expenses immediately, with a provision that would first take effect starting again in the January of this year. So this bill conforms Tennessee's treatment of the R&D expense deduction to the practices that were in place on both the federal and state level prior to January of this year. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
You've heard the explanation. Are there any questions? Chairman Williams.
Thank you. I don't want to get off in the weeds, but I guess the question is there a clear definition of what research and development expenses are, either in the federal code or in ours?
I'm sure there is. I don't know that for.
Well, we can find out.
Pinpoint. We can certainly find that out, but I'm sure there are.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? If not, then we're voting to send House Bill 2144 to full finance. All in favor say aye. Opposed? House Bill 2144 moves to full finance.
Members, we are going to go back to item number 5. Item number 5 on our calendar is House Bill 1681 by Chairman Subcommittee. We have a motion and second. You have a motion and a second. You're recognized on House Bill 1681 for a brief description, sir.
Is there an amendment on this, I believe?
There is not. It's traveling with it.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much. Very quickly, I know your time is valuable. This creates a grant program, a 2-year pilot program for a non-degree, non-credited course in our community colleges and TCAT centers. Briefly, I'll give you an example. CDL, heavy equipment operators, phlebotomists, line worker program, people that climb the telephone poles. Currently, those do not qualify for any type of scholarships. However, I'm out of breath. I just came from a committee. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. However, those careers are things that could really change the lives of our students who don't want to go on to a 4-year or 2-year institution and spend the time. We have a program down in Murray County. It's a line worker program. It's a 10-week course. Once they graduate, 83% graduation rate, 100% placement rate. Starting pay is roughly $56,000 to $66,000 a year. 10 weeks after high school, 10 weeks. Phlebotomist, heavy equipment operators to build our roads. So that's all that is. It's about a $2.8 million fiscal note, Mr. Chairman. I am committed. TBR is behind this bill. We're going to try to find this money, Mr. Chairman, and bring it back to you and hopefully get this program rolling.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Good bill. Any discussion? You've heard the description. Any discussion? Leader Camper, you recognized?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor, for this bill. Do you see that with the building of the Ford plant that's coming and all of the concerns around not having a qualified workforce or enough people because everybody is needing workers, do you see that this bill could potentially help to that end?
You're recognized, sir.
Fantastic question. Yes, being a chairman over in education, we had a presentation about that. And the amount of workers that they're going to need just for construction of that facility is massive. Okay, 26,000, I think the chairman, our majority leader said. We got to get those kids who don't want to go to 2 years, don't want to go to 4, no offense to UT and those other, but they want to have a great job. We just had the construction road workers who came here, and I talked to them about this bill, and they're like, thank you. We got to have people to operate these heavy equipment. This is an investment in the jobs that build it, that fix it, that maintain it. And I hope and pray with the $5 billion we've increased the budget that we can find a measly $2.8 million laying around somewhere. I will invest my time to find it for these kids.
Thank you. Leader Camper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, you know, I remember over the years us having a really long, in-depth hearings and testimony and conversation around disconnected youth and where are they and what are they doing. And I think this is a way that we can connect to them and get them a certificate where they can have a gainful employment, move on with their life. If you think about the sewage pipeline that the General Services is having built right now from the mega site to the Mississippi River, it's going to be a really huge competition to get people to work and to get them qualified to do these jobs. So I hope that we can find the money to actually do this. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Sponsor.
Thank you, Leader Camper. You're recognized, Representative Speaker.
And to be briefly to touch on some of these that TBR has already identified that could qualify for this program: truck driving, certified nurse assistant, phlebotomy, certified production technician, heavy equipment operator, NC3 training and certification, machinist, diesel engine, heating and air, mechatronics, welding, welders, power line constructions. These are all jobs starting pay $40-some thousand a year, if not more. Line workers, power line workers, $74,000 a year right now. These are people that don't wind up on drug addiction, alcoholism, teen pregnancy, gang violence, and in our prisons. This is the group of people that we're overlooking in education right now. These are the people that are going to build it and fix it for the next 50 years in our country. So I'm going to find $2.8 million and come back to this committee with that money.
Leader Camper. Good. All right. Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Representative Sapicki. I guess I'm a little bit confused. Was there any discussion with TBR about at least doing accreditation for these so that they could use Tennessee Promise dollars?
You're recognized.
The lottery is very protected up here, right now, because there's no formal classroom setting, like where they come to class. Like when I went to college, you had to go to class at certain times and show up and do. It's hands-on stuff. The line worker, there's literally 20 telephone poles in Murray County shoved in the ground, and the electric companies come out and they train these kids how to do that. It's very difficult because they're short classes. They're 10 weeks, they're 15 weeks. They're in and out making this money because, and I'm just speaking from Murray County with the line worker program, these utility companies are so far behind the hiring curve right now. They've got to get these kids as quick as they can, and men and women, I should say, these men and women as quick as they can into these programs. Now, if finance wants to tie at the lottery, make my job of finding $2.8 million. Now, remember, it's a 2-year pilot. It's only for 2 years. We're going to get the data and see how this gets rolled out. If Finance Committee wants to solve that problem for me, I'd be tickled. But I will tell you this, in education, we are very protective of lottery, even though they return, I think, 70-some million to lottery fund this year. I just need 2.8. Actually, you know what? That's a bad statement. The children of Tennessee need $2.8 million.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Speaker. Chairman Williams. Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Chairman, to the committee. Is the disconnect the fact that we have a 2-year accreditation and there's nothing really that we've dropped down below that? I know I'm a small business owner, and my little brother hit me in the head with a backhoe because, it's trial and error sometimes for small companies, and we don't have the capacity to send these people out, and there's very little training. that's even available because nobody specializes in it. I mean, you can go get certified on one piece of equipment, but you can't get certified on 20. So, I mean, what you're doing is great. I don't understand really where the disconnect is with higher ed to some, I like what you're doing. I'm wondering where the pushback is here.
You're
And
recognized.
Gaining access to Promise with our community colleges or Reconnect, there are certain requirements that a student has to meet. And then there are certain, according to to TCATs and community colleges, there are certain parameters in place on what kind of class that looks like. Like the traditional, like Mr. Baum teaches, where kids come in, you sit for 50 minutes, or in his class maybe longer. These are all over the place. Like a CDL truck driver, he may spend a certain amount of time in the classroom, but then you know what he's got to do? He's got to drive the truck. So it's not a normal classroom situation. And so the community colleges and TCATs can administer these programs, but what we're trying to do is find the money for these kids to get the tuition to go, like Promise or Reconnect. In Murray County, there are 40 kids right now waiting for the line worker program. 8 of them have qualified. The rest are trying to scrape together enough money to take the course on a job that in 10 weeks will pay them $70,000. Talk about a great investment for Tennessee. We spend $4,500 and we get someone who's making $70,000 a year 10 weeks later. That's a fantastic investment for our taxpayers. So it's going to come down to, I got to find $2.8 million.
Representative Vogels.
Thank you, Chairman, and to the sponsor. Are we not doing some of that with dual enrollment? The question is, I guess, is this a problem for higher ed, or maybe is this a problem for K through 12? Should we be training these juniors and seniors on we train them how to drive cars. Why are we not training them how to operate equipment and climb poles and do hands-on stuff like we used to? I know we're doing megatronics. I keep hearing about that, but there's other things out there.
You're recognized.
I 100% agree with you. I would wish you would come to our education committee and say those exact same words. If you go back, and I'm 55 years old, and I remember how education used to be. There wasn't like a dual pathway. It was like you took your aptitude test, and the guidance counselor said, "Here's what you're cut out for," and that's the path you went on. We got a lot of kids that we have in classrooms that they don't want to be in classrooms. They want to be out in the shop. They want to be welding something. They want to be building something. They want to be driving something. And so sometimes in education, we are cautious because we have to be, because we have a child's future at hand there. And so what we want to do is we want to create just this 2-year pilot program, keep the cost as low as possible, and then we can come back in 2 years and say, hey, here's the amount of people that we've turned out in all these different categories. Now we want to make it a permanent program. And then I think once we have that data for everybody, then I think we can get TBR and everybody else on board in the long haul.
Thank you. Representative Vogels.
Just thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your work in both of these areas. I mean, this is the skill set. And to your point, being a senior in high school, if you would have given me access to a backhoe to tear something up, I would have gone to that class every day. Absolutely. Thank you.
Representative Whitson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a great bill, and I look forward to supporting it. But I also like to put in a plug for the Tennessee National Guard. You can go learn these skills, too, by enlisting. In 12 weeks, you're back at work in your hometown. Thank you.
Let me make a brief comment on that.
Okay, brief.
Right now, 93% of our children that apply for the military can't get in because they failed the written, the drug, or the physical test. That's got to be an option for them, too. And that comes back to us in K through 12. That's all I got, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Any further discussion? Seeing none. Do have a cost associated with House Bill 1681. I think you see there's a lot of folks, I think, willing to work with you on this. So without objection, House Bill 1681 will go behind the budget. Thank you. All right, members, item number 16. House Bill 340. House Bill 340 has been calendared 3 times, so it will go on the special calendar, which will also be provided with our final calendar. So without objection, House Bill 340 will be put on special calendar without objection. All right. That's everything. All right, members, that's all of the items on our calendar. Any further business coming before the committee? Seeing none, any objection to adjourning? Seeing none, we're adjourned.